Hi. How's everybody doing tonight? You're allowed to yell. That's right. I know, you think library. This is the yelling space. The friendly yelling space. My name's Aiden Flax-Clark. I'm the director of Live from NYPL, and I'm thrilled you're all here. Thrilled everyone who's joining us online. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah. I get to introduce Gloria Edim, who is here to talk about her absolutely stunning and beautiful new book, Gather Me, a memoir in praise of the books that saved me. I believe it was published today, yes? Is today the pub date? So we're here to launch it. Incredible. I mean, obviously a book that is in praise of books, which, by the way, every chapter starts with book recommendations. Like, what is more on brand for the library? Of course, we are going to launch this book here. But I'm also personally a big admirer of Gloria's work with Well-Read Black Girl. I would say that she is an all-star of the book world. So it's just a true privilege to help share this book. And hopefully you all saw that it is available for sale outside. I very much encourage you to purchase a copy afterward if you weren't able to on your way in. I believe Gloria will be signing copies of the book afterward right up here on the stage. Of course, you can also get it with your library card, and surely everyone has a library card, yes? All right, that's good. That's good. I come looking for you if I see a, unsure. I mean, they're free. You don't have an excuse, right? It's such a beautiful book, though. I can't encourage you enough. However you can pick it up, to please check it out. We have some other great live events coming up. We're going to take a short break because something is happening next week. I don't really remember what it is, but we're going to take that week off. But after that, we're going to have some really wonderful events. Next month, we are going to have live music and conversation right here on the stage that will celebrate our recently acquired collection of sheet music from the legendary Yiddish radio station WEVD. Myra Kalman will be here with Ruman Alam to talk about her beautiful memoir in this hellscape of a year by opening up the entire building for a one-night-only celebration of James Baldwin. Yeah. Who, I don't know if you know, is the subject of a truly excellent exhibition up at the Schomburg Center. No, but Schomburg Center is home to the papers of James Baldwin, and this show is the first time that anything from that collection has been seen in public, so it is a truly, truly special exhibition, and we're going to celebrate it down here on December 13th. All of it is free, so you have no excuse not to come, and you can find out about that and everything else we do by signing up for our newsletters, and please, hope to see you back again. Everyone got note cards when you came in, I hope. Those are for asking questions. During the talk, some of my colleagues will come by and pick up your note cards, and Gloria will answer as many as she can at the end of the talk. And if you're watching online, you can put your questions in the chat, and we will be very glad to take those as well. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Isbahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and of course by everyone here in this room and watching online. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your support. Please give it up for Aminatou Sow and Gloria Edim.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh my gosh, I love to see so many people we love here. Okay, I'm going to do something insane, but this is for me. Glorious, my selfie. We're having a blast. Yeah, no,
Ready?
we look great.
Oh, yeah, we're cute. I had to do the millennial peace sign.
That's right. I am so honored to be here with you, Gloria. You're such a big part of my reading life and of my writing community. Getting this galley was the biggest galley brag of my life. I was like, thank you so much. This is all I want. I guess my question for you is, why a memoir? Why now?
Okay, so I have this really clear moment. It probably was in 2016 or 2017, and one of my wonderful book club members, who will remain nameless, came up to me and she was just like, it just doesn't seem like anything bad has ever happened to you.
Oh, wow. She said, check your privilege.
right. And I had this moment, I was like, oh, girl, don't let the enthusiasm and the energy and the smiles get it twisted. There have been so many things, so many highs and lows, so many disappointments that have happened, but I always choose to have an attitude and a perspective of optimism because I always feel like there's just like one more day, one more opportunity, I can just keep moving forward. And when she said that, I was like, oh, like I'm not being transparent enough. I'm not like really sharing the things that have really shaped me or been painful in my life, you know, and there have been many things that I feel could help other people. And so it just kind of like, it was like one of those like pins in the back of my mind. I was like, what does that mean? Like, what am I giving off to make you think that like nothing bad, quote unquote, has ever happened to me? And so when I did have the opportunity to kind of like write all the things, the good and the bad, I wanted to be as clear and as vulnerable as possible and really put everything out there.
Wow. I can't believe that person said that to you. Like, I just want to, like, first of all, how dare you?
Right.
You know, I guess, like, I was very excited to see that you were writing a memoir because, like, and, like, I talked to you about this recently. It is still, like, a very, like, modern innovation that African women write nonfiction and write memoir specifically. You know, like Nigerian women were very much like at the forefront of this with like Buchi Emeta, like writing. French-speaking African women, that first memoir was published in 1989. So it's still, you know, it's still this like very relatively new thing. And, you know, and I think like I have a theory about it that it is because we are not supposed to tell our business. So if you write it as a novel or like as a story, and I love novels, I love fiction, but I think that like culturally, you are allowed to talk about very difficult things in fiction. We are not always afforded like telling our own truths. And so I am just like very curious like how emotionally like you prepared to do that because it's still, you know, like it is uncomfortable and it's very personal.
Yeah, I had this moment where I felt like I was doing research on my own life. Like I would look up songs that I listened to in high school and I would like read all my old journals and I just was really trying to think about the mindset I was in during the process of writing this. And thankfully I had an incredible partner in this. You know, my developmental like editor, Maya, was just like the person who was like next to me throughout this. And I don't think I would have been able to do this without her because it was a very emotional process. And not only was it emotional because of the subject matter, it was also during the pandemic. I was also pregnant. I felt so raw and so vulnerable. Every time I had to like really revisit memories from, you know, my mother's illness to my father's passing, I would really like, it would get caught in my throat. Like, you have that feeling when you're swimming and you feel like you're like drowning a little bit, like water gets in your nose? Like that kind of just like intense, visceral, like, I feel consumed by this and I can't breathe. And I would have to step away and I would have to talk to my editors and I would have to like send a group text and just kind of like come back up to the surface and say, hey, like, why am I doing this? It's like, oh, I'm doing this for, you know, little Glory. I'm doing this for my son Zeke. I'm doing this so I can be like relieved and feel liberated from all the things that I've gone through and feel like a sense of like freedom. You know, I turned 40 recently and I just didn't want to take this into like the next decade of my life because even though I was processing and going to therapy and doing all these things, it was almost just like still sitting there and putting it in the book. Like, it just pushed it away. It made it said like, this was real. This happened, but you also like overcame it and you also got to the other side and you still have like so much life to live. So everything that I was able to write and put into this book was very liberating. And to your point about this idea of having a model for other generations or other writers to look to, I wanted it to feel accessible and approachable in a way that, you know, you can do this too. And it can be a space of just healing and catharsis. I was recently at the National Book Festival and one of the art authors who I adore, she's an incredible scholar. Again, she will remain nameless. She was on stage and she was like, I do not write for catharsis. And I was like, because I feel like that's the only reason I write. Like, it is the only reason. Like, I am yearning to get it out of my mind, get it out of my body, and onto the page, so I can feel like calm again, when it is not ruminating in my head, when it is like on my laptop or in my journal, I'm just like, okay, I can process it and move forward from it. Otherwise, it just kind of like sits there and just is like a little hamster wheel, just like, you know, like it's just like how my, you know, mind works. I don't know if it's some undiagnosed da-da-da, but like it's just how I'm just always thinking about something all the time. And if I don't write it down, I can't process it.
I don't know. It sounds like diagnosed trying to get free to me.
Listen, we might have to talk offline because I feel like when you were saying some things earlier about your godson, I was like, that sounds like me.
Well, thank you for bringing up process because I have so many questions. One, and also thank you for bringing up therapy because Black women going to therapy is my religion.
Let's do it.
And so, yeah, so I'm just like wondering, like, you're sitting down to write. Like, I know you have this like developmental editor, so you are like, where, like the journals, where are they sitting? Like, how do you organize the day? How are you, how are you writing? How do the words get on the page?
Well, a lot of times it was like looking at photos, like I have, and that's why I was very intentional about putting photos of my family, of my son, of my, you know, my parents, my brothers, all on the cover of the book, because I would look at those photos and I would try to like think back to memories. There's a scene with me and my best friends when we attend my my mother's second wedding when she got remarried, and we had to be like bridesmaids. It was like absolutely ridiculous, but we were there, and I don't think I could have like retrieved that memory without looking at those photos and actually talking to them too. Even there's another like scene where I'm like experiencing this great debate between me and my AP English teacher, Mr. Burns. I went back and sent this long group text to my friends. I'm like, what did I say? How was I? Like, I was like going back and forth with them. So I felt like I was doing this investigation of just, is it the way that I'm remembering it? Is it accurate?
Yeah.
And like, can I like, you know, do a checks and balances of myself? Can I talk to my friends? Can I talk to my brother? There was a moment when I was writing about my younger brother, and there was a very sensitive subject. I talked about him when he had like a brush with the law, and it was like something that was very scary for our family. And I, when my editor and I went back to him and talked to him about it, he remembered it completely different.
Yeah.
Like I was like, wait, what? What did he say? Like, what is happening? It was like totally different from what was in my mind. And I remember being so scared for him, so like really trying to be just like protect him. And when, in his memory, he was like, yeah, it was okay, you know, it's fine, you know. like he had a totally different recollection of this moment that was so pivotal for me that like scared the shit out of me, to be quite frank. And he was just kind of like, you know, it just happened, you know.
How do you reconcile those memories? Like, I remember in writing my first book, and I'm currently working on a memoir also, like writing these scenes where I'm like, this is all true. And I go back to do the fact check, and multiple times, like either like massive details are wrong, or like the vibe is wrong.
Yeah.
And I just like, you're just like, wow, like the hard drive is not what it's supposed to be. But I hear you, like, you know, you're just like, you remember it. How do you reconcile that in your writing process? Like, do you scrap the whole scene? Do you go back? Do you rewrite it? Do you like, how does that work?
I do rewriting, but I also like right into what I don't know. Like I'm like totally okay to like have those gaps and those inconsistencies live, because I feel like that's true to memory, and that's how we experience things. So of course, in my sibling lineup, I'm the oldest. I have a brother who's 5 years younger. Then I have another brother who is 13 years younger. So how we experience our parents, how we experience like growing up is completely different. So I try my best to honor that and say, and like know that, you know, what I'm writing isn't supposed to be the exact truth, but like a truth that is very true to me. And, you know, that's why you always put the disclaimer in the front of the book, like, these memories are true to the author. You know what I mean? Because
is that why we do it, or is it because of James Fran Oprah?
Yeah,
like,
that too. That
know?
too. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Not the throwback, not the James. Yeah, but like, yes, but it's just to give people an understanding of that this are my most authentic, true thoughts. This is how I experience it. And this is like, this is how I felt it. And I think that's like the most important part, like the texture of the emotion. Like, this is how I felt. Like, yes, my brother might have like brushed off that moment, but my memory was terrified. Yeah. My memory felt like it was like, this could be the end all be all. This could be the change of the whole trajectory of his life. Maybe it was like a little dramatic, but that's how I experienced it. And that's like the fear that I felt was like very real and very visceral. And so I tried to write to that. And I tried to be honest to the experience that I had in that moment. And I really am grateful that I had so many journals, so many like, you know, I had a habit when I was in like high school and middle school where I did like scrapbooks. I was like really into like zines and like cutting things out. Like I still have them. And so like it was
the
such
Glory Edim archive.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Where?
Oh my god, it's a lot of Hello Kitty and stuff like. But you know, like it seems silly to like still have that in my 40s, but that was like a part of me, and I think part of it was like I didn't. We moved a lot when I was young. You know, I didn't ever. Like some people have a house that they go to that they lived in their whole childhood. I didn't have that. So I had like the scrapbook that like went around with me to every apartment and to every college. And when I moved to Brooklyn, it was like the scrapbook. It was like my house in paper. And so even though it was like a small thing, it really did make me feel like connected to my younger self. And I was glad I had it when it came to like writing this book.
Yeah, wow. You know, another thing that's like amazing is that every chapter is essentially like organized by giving you these book recommendations. If you don't know this already, Glory is a scholar and just has this like intense capacity for recall and for connecting multiple works of literature in a way, honestly, that I think I like admire that a lot about you, because I think that it is a service to the reader as well, you know, and so much of the work that you do is that it is this like incredible pulling people along into scholarship and into learning. Yeah. But I'm just like wondering, like, how did you come towards like that organizing model where you're like, okay, like this book, these books, this chapter, like this next chapter also is like telling the story of these authors and these books?
That's a great question. Originally, I really wanted to have my mother be the focal point of the story, and to like work around the story, the memoir around the moment where I felt like she had let us go in a way, and we were finding our way back to her. And in that process, it was like too codependent on her story. It was like really relying on her memories, her experiences. Some of them I didn't even have access to, but it wasn't allowing me to really come up and be transparent about my own experiences. And the books became like an anchor. They were like, it was easy for me to like remember my memories and think about who I was in middle school, like, you know, in the 4th grade, or even just like thinking about, there's a moment where my mom, she would read Bible stories to us, and instead of just like thinking about like writing the story about her and her reading it, it was like, how did I feel when she read that? Like, what was that like? And what like images and impressions that like really impressed upon me before in the beginning, I was really, really just like so anxious to tell about, because I was very drawn to like the mother-daughter dynamic. And I like that in narratives too. Like there's so many books where I've like read where I'm like, oh, there's like mother and daughters that have complicated relationships, because me and my mother do have a complicated one. And so I was reading a lot of memoirs that way. And so that was like my initial thinking. And then when I stepped away from that, I'm like, that's not my story. Like it is, we do have a complicated relationship, but I can't like write to that. But books are so easy for me. Like I can remember exactly how I felt when I read the narrative of Frederick Douglass. I remember exactly how I felt when I read like Little Women, and like how I'm drawn to Jo March, or when I read Jacqueline Woodson. Those things, that enthusiasm comes like second nature. I don't even have to think about it. So writing about it felt like very effortless, and just talking about it and being excited, like that comes to me in a way that, I don't know, it's like riding a bike, you know? Like when I talk about books, I don't have to second guess myself. When I talk about other harder emotions, that's when I kind of like hesitate, or I'm like a little bit more censored.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking about books, I can be like, oh yeah, this protagonist, or that happened, or I was in this grade. Like it just was really, it was easier. And so that's why it became like the arc of the book, and the way to just kind of like it's like a book memory. It's like your favorite song. Like, you know, when you're about to do karaoke, you're going to like, you know, sing Bohemian.
Absolutely not doing karaoke, but yes.
Right. But you know the words. When you hear Tiny Dancer, you're like, you're on it.
No, I
you
know what you mean, but I will not subject anyone to that. I want to read this passage and kind of pick up on this conversation with you. So you say, the playful banter between my parents differed from how my mother engaged with me, her firstborn daughter. When my mother was raised, there is no back and forth conversation. In Nigeria, children didn't get to have an opinion. They quickly obeyed their parents, finished their food, and prayed for forgiveness. My mother valued obedience and respect over playfulness. So in our household, she and I never engage in frivolous conversations, only stern instructions. Fix the table, do your homework, turn off the television, read a book, eat, always eat. Yeah. For my mother, raising a well-behaved child was the ultimate goal. That hit me in my feels in in this really intense way because I think for a lot of people who have a West African mom, there is, and I think it's an experience that is more universal than where we're from. But I just so much of your work is serious, and you are now able to do it in this very playful, creative, colorful way. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, if you could speak to where you think that comes from.
Oh man, that's a great question. I think part of me is trying to escape the confines of being conservative and still and all the instruction that I had to obey as a young person. Mm-hmm. And while it did instill in me a sense of self-determination and resilience, and I don't give up easily, when things are difficult, I can tough it out. And I do attribute a lot of that to my parents and my upbringing of just kind of we keep going. Mm-hmm. Even when it's difficult and it's hard, you just keep going towards whatever the goal or the outcome is. However, I did think that does stifle the creativity. I think naturally I am a creative person. I do really light up when I see colors and music and art. It makes me feel just warm inside, and that curiosity and that just drive for seeing the joy in life. It just makes me so happy. And now that I'm a mother and I see that in my son, I'm just there's no way that I would want to stifle that. His excitement and how he lights up when he sees things is just it's very infectious. And I also, I'm going to cry.
That's okay. I cried a lot reading your book. So if you want to cry talking about it, it's all good.
It just makes me, it makes me curious about because my mom doesn't really share about how I was as a younger person. So when I see my son, I'm I imagine I was that way. Mm. Yeah. So I just want to nurture that as much as possible. I want him to have the space to explore and ask me questions, and I'm sure my family is just why are you having these long conversations with a 4-year-old? Because I really do entertain a lot of his questions, and when I'm tired, the way that I flip it is I just say, why do you think? And then I'll listen to him, say whatever he's thinking. But I imagine that because I really do feel the daily patterns of our lives are who we become. So if you have the space to ask a lot of questions, you become an adult who's able to ask a lot of questions and not feel shame or judgment. You can just be curious and open. And if you don't know something, you can say, I don't know it, and move forward with it. And I think that there is such a beauty that is underestimated in that. Yeah. Just being able to say I don't know, tell me why, tell me more. I think when I see people that don't have that, to second guess themselves in that way, I'm oh, it's so amazing. That must have been cultivated in you in a way where you just didn't ever question yourself or ever doubt yourself. And even if you did, you knew that there were other people that really supported and loved you in that, So.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and here come the tissues. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think the way that I, anybody have anywhere to go? The way that I experience your work is truly as this love letter to curiosity. I think that it's really hard sometimes to push past this conditioning of reading is for like it's from a position of privilege, or it's for affluent people, or being smart, like all of these messages that like as children you kind of take in. And it's so striking to like read this book of somebody who had, a tough, interesting childhood. I don't want to give any spoilers because it's so good. Like it's so good. I want you to find out for yourself exactly where and how like glory comes to become glory. But like it's just so striking to me that you have the childhood that you have, and then you are this like very vibrant, curious, deeply intelligent person who is able to like convey that in your work and really invite readers and people in the book club to like do the same, you know? And I find that like to be a really beautiful avenue for community.
I really appreciate that. And I would say that like for the parents or the folks, mentors, or whoever is just like working with young people, like I really feel like it takes like one or two people, right? Like it doesn't take so much to build that. Like there are different moments in my life that I feel like individuals like planted a seed or were nurturing. And in an odd way, I really do think my father too, because I think so much of it too was also attributed to my name. Like there is so much meaning in the name Glory just because of the definition of it, like I would have friends who were like, oh, you must be like really religious, or like, oh, you must be like, there was always a joke, highly favored. You must be so highly favored. So your name, And I was like, yes, I am, like, so it's just like, if you have just even if it's like the smallest bit of encouragement, or the person, someone just to be like, oh, I see something in you, and the person might not see it, but like, I feel like throughout my life, I've had enough people say like, I see something, like that English teacher, like my friends. I really have a lot of beautiful chosen family that have just like poured into me, and enough of that can like build you to a certain point, right? And then you can like pick yourself up and figure out how to keep moving forward to that. So I really do. I'm very thankful. I'm thankful for my teachers. I'm thankful for the people that I encountered throughout life that just like encouraged me and said like, here's this book, or here's this opportunity, or here's this, I did a lot of like Girl Scouts and AP English and all these things that like were towards my betterment, but I didn't really realize at the time how much they were fulfilling me and just building my intellectual curiosity.
I love that. You visit like a lot of like authors in the book that we are familiar with, like Nikki Giovanni, Audre Lorde, Maya Angelou looms very large in this book in like the sweetest way possible. But there's this passage where you talk about, like rereading like jazz and All About Love, and how you had to learn how to become a more careful reader. And so I am wondering if you could share some of that with everybody who's here today.
Absolutely. So as a young person, I did not do the close reading. And so this would be a spoiler a little bit, but with jazz, it's one of my, between Sula and Jazz, they're my two favorite books by Toni Morrison. And I was so certain that Jazz was a love story. I was like, it's such a beautiful love story. I was like talking to a friend, and one of my friends was like, girl, someone is murdered on the first page. And she's like, how is this a love story? Like we had like a big debate about like, she's like, why do you think this is a love story? Like it's like, there's like a lot of bad things happening here. And I was just like, oh, like it just was like one of those moments where it was like, that is not how I read it. Like I read all the self-sacrifice in the characters is really endearing and beautiful and loving, and a sign, like literally the sacrifice of yourself was love. And I had to like reread that as an adult and be like, oh no, like all these things that are happening to the characters are really, really bad. And they're like representative of something else. Like Morrison is not telling you that this is a love story. She's telling you about much more of the complication, and like she's speaking of the Great Migration. She's talking about like how society pins, people of color and Black people in the space of just like limited options. And the beauty of the love is it's a different kind of love. It's not the one that I was envisioning. And so I had to sit back and like reread it again. And I had the same experience with like reading The Color Purple, you know, like I didn't really see the beauty and the connectedness of Shug and Celie initially. I didn't see like the abuse that was happening. But that's not what you should take away. But my first time reading it is not, I didn't see those things. And so I had to take a step back as, I don't even want to say it's adult because I reread it in college, and I don't like adulthood. I feel like ventures way past like those 4 years of college, but just like continuously like rereading and understanding it differently. When I had my son Zeke, I reread The Color Purple, and I sat with a lot of Edgewood Standycat during that time too. I decided to like reread like a lot of her work. I reread like Crick Crack and What It Takes to Be Art. Like I just started like rereading things, and with lived experience, my purview changed, my understanding, my self-compassion changed, and I was able to analyze it in a different way that I didn't do previously. And I think that's like with youth, but also being in conversation. I don't know if I would have like had that kind of like moment if I had like not talked to my friend and she'd just been like very frank with me. So that's another reason why we need to be in community when we talk about books. Like you can, it's almost like that way when you there's two things come to mind. Sometimes when you're reading like your e-reader and you can see how many people have like highlighted the same sentence.
Yeah.
Like I love that. I'm like, oh my God, 200 people read this, like love this sentence. Like what does that mean? You know? That's like my favorite thing. And then like this idea of just like the memory of like how it like, it opens up your world in a different way. And so when the first time I read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, it's different from the first time you read it, but we have this kind of universal experience that we're like feeling because of it, you know? It's such a beautiful thing. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think you like talking about that and also writing about it it really confronted me so much with like how much of reading culture can be consumer culture. You know, it's like, it's always like, there's a thing, you got to read the new thing, you got to the whatever. And I was like, no, actually, I just want to revisit everything I already read and re-engage with it in a different way. I also did not know, which shame on me, that Audre Lorde was a librarian at one time, which I found out in your book. And also sidebar, Mariam Kaba, the wonderful activist, does this like fantastic tour in Harlem of like the revolutionary women who live there. And the Audre Lorde scuttlebutt is that she was very, I quote, annoying. And I really love that because I'm like, of course, she's a poet. Of course, there's a little annoyingness here, but also everybody loves her. But there was also like there was a world in which like you were considering library studies. What, like, tell me more about that.
Well, listen, only because like I really wanted to do something more creative, but I was like, no, I have to do something more like, you know, I have to do something that's like safe. And I felt like being a librarian would be a safe and like very rewarding career. So I was just like, oh, so it was like in my mind, my mom wanted me to become a nurse, which I was like, oh, I don't like bloody. But so it was like, so like my short list was like nurse, librarian, and then teacher. But I cannot wake up. Like, I don't know if my friends are in the audience. Like, I'm not a morning person. I was like, oh my God. like, what time does school start again? like, you got to be there like
I'm
7.
also dying at librarian as a safe job. They're literally the soldiers on the front lines of democracy.
Yes.
Like,
okay, you know, this was years ago. I didn't know. But like, I just was like, oh, you know, these are the things, like, you know, quote unquote, I could be safe. I could, you know, test this out and I would enjoy it. Like, because also all 3 of those positions are opportunities to be of service, and like you're helping people, you're close with them. Absolutely. Even with being a nurse, like I was like, if I do it, I'm going to do it with kids. I'll do like pediatrics. You know what I mean? But again, shots, blood, I could not do that. So I had to like think through what could I really do that would be sustainable. Like I don't have like this trust fund that's like looming in the background. I have to be smart. I have to do things that I can, you know, provide for myself and ideally for my family, like make sure like they're good too, you know? So it was this list and luckily, you know, fast forward, you see, I didn't have to do any of those things, thank goodness. And also like my brothers are like very smart and very lucrative. So it worked out. But I did love the idea of being a librarian. And I also feel like in my own little way, like I, you know, in allyship librarians. I love them. I love them so much.
We love them. You write a lot about, family, your family, but all families really being built on secrets and really having to expose a lot of that. I am curious, like, how you negotiated, like, kind of telling that with also balancing out, like how you talk about your siblings or how you talk about your parents. Because I know that for myself, like, I have a rule of, like, be ruthless with myself and gentle with everyone else. Yeah. And sometimes it gets me in trouble, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. It always is a balancing act. And so for my own benefit, I want to know, like, what your process around that is.
I think that there are sacred truths, right? Like, you have to have boundaries around certain things that in my mind, there were 3 subjects that I knew that I couldn't touch on in this book that would be really upsetting to my family completely. So I left those alone, but everything else was on the table. Everything else was on the table. And I tried to write in a way or frame the book in a way that always came back to my viewpoint and how I felt. And that's why, again, the books were a perfect anchor for me, because it didn't delve into so much. A lot of the experiences that are painful or challenging around my parents were, so I'm first generation. Both my parents were products of the Biafra War. They survived that. It's part of our family origin story. It's the main reason why they immigrated to the U.S. And I did not know a lot of that. The reason why I even they didn't share it with me. They just were very much about, coming to the U.S. and starting over and assimilating. And I remember when Chimamanda wrote Half of the Yellow Sun, that became a point where I was like, hey, this book is out. Like, it's about the Biafra War. Like, what do you think? And they were like, yeah, we went through that. Like, they slowly started to share things very, very slowly. But even then, they didn't tell me full stories. I would get a sentence here or there, and I had to do research. I had to talk to other family members. I had to go to Nigeria myself and ask people on the street. It wasn't something they volunteered. So again, books still were the space where I was able to kind of get a concrete understanding of what happened to my parents and think about their experience in a whole way. But when it came to crafting everything, I was very mindful of still just sticking to those 3 things. And as long as they didn't touch those 3 things, I was fine. So I think you just have to figure out whatever your boundaries are and be very safe around that. And then again, everything else is on the table.
I love that. Towards the end of the book, you write a lot about starting the book club and and I love that section because the energy, it's really giving heist movie caper. It's just we're going, but it's they're not stealing, they're just reading books. I love and there's just so much love and community that's being poured back into you. And so I just want to hear more about what that experience has been, because it really, I think a lot of people know you because of the book club, which is fantastic. And it's also not the entirety of, who you are.
Yeah. And that's why I was even when I was writing it, I was yes, there's so many moments that I can talk about the book club and talk about the incredible encounters that I had. And I really decided to focus on the origin story. I really wanted people to know how I met Naomi Jackson. And I don't think she's in the audience, because I would make her stand up. It's okay. Because she was again, it's that 1 or 2 people that can change your life. She was the first person. I met her at Greenlight Bookstore. She said yes to come to my book club. She didn't know me from Adam. She came. At the time, she brought her friend Natalie Diaz, who's also an incredible poet and writer, just so phenomenal. We sat in a circle. We talked about her book, the Star Side of Bird Hill. And that book talks about a young family, 2 young girls who go back to the Caribbean, and for folks from the diaspora, go back home. That's how you refer to going, whether it's Jamaica, Antigua, Nigeria, Guinea, you're going back home. And so that was the first time I read this fictional story about 2 girls going back home to live with their grandmother because their mother is dealing with depression. And it was like something like lit up in my brain. I was like, oh, you can write about that? You're talking about secrets? Like, and I wasn't sure if she had experienced that in her real life, but just having it in fiction to be like, even the idea of referring to back home in a book in that way, and being like these young people who grew up in Brooklyn, they're having experiences, they're just going through this challenging time, they're talking about it. It really illuminated and lit something up in me that I was like, oh, this is so interesting, and I wanted to just like talk to her. But then, we had this book club and everything else like manifested from that. But had Naomi said no, I don't know if like Well Read Black Girl would exist. But she said yes. And then she's the one who introduced me to Angela Flournoy, who wrote the beautiful book The Turner House. And then Angela Flournoy introduced me to the next person and the next person. Like it just was like this like small like, it was just like all these connections that I couldn't have like planned or predicted. It just happened. That same year that I hosted, again, a very small book club with Angela, she was a National Book Award finalist, And so people were like, oh, you found this person. I'm like, I did not find this person. like you cannot give me any credit, but it's just like the zeitgeist of everything like coming together in the way that it did, that like I was given a little bit of just like recognition and like love online and otherwise, and it just like continued to grow. And again, I could never have ever. I still feel like I'm in awe. Like I still like I'm like, oh fuck, I wrote. Oh sorry. Like
it's okay.
Like I'm like I wrote a book. Like what is this? And like it's even I even appreciate you just like being so gentle and so sensitive and just be mindful of like all the things I experienced. But I will tell you, my editors would tell you, I was just kind of like, that was just like a normal day. Like nothing about what I experienced. It didn't really dawn on me like how traumatic or how challenging it was or it is. It just was like, that was my life. And like, I don't have like a space of like not doing it. It was like, okay, like I had to do it. There wasn't any other alternatives. Yeah. And so I think like in writing this and talking to people about it, people were like, are you okay? Like, how's everything going? I'm like, I'm fine. Like, it was like a long time ago. I'm good, But like, at the time, I did not see the gravity of it. I didn't see how difficult it was. I just was like living my life.
Wow. Well, Angela is here today, so I'm going to make her wave. And then it's all good. Wave, she is not. Wave. But also, I appreciate what you're saying about that tenderness and that care, because I think that, like, as Black women, we have to give that to each other. So I hear you on the not seeing it, and also you extend that to everyone in your community, so you deserve the same. We have a lot of questions from the audience, and surprise, surprise, they are all very similar. But since we've spent all this time praising you, I'm going to ask a very difficult question. Can you tell everybody here how many times you had to take the permit, the driving permit? How many times, and can you drive? We've spent an hour praising you. I need the people to understand what's happening here.
This is the thing.
How many times? How many times?
It was a total of 8 times. Yes. But it was only because I'm not a good test taker. Okay? I'm not a good test taker, and I think under pressure, like I don't perform well. And I just was like, and then at one point, like I wasn't living in DC, so I was like coming back down to like take the test. Like it just was like a lot. And I can drive now.
We love that.
I can. If there's an emergency, if someone like fell flat out and there's like only one person to drive, I can take you to the hospital. Like this is something. Do I like to drive? Do I want to? No, thank you. It's not like...
I'm literally teasing you. I'm a COVID driver, so It's all good. But it made me really happy. I was like, look at this smart person who also could not figure this out. It's all good. It's all good. Okay. Here are some of the questions that the audience has for you. I'm going to read both of these because I think they're kind of similar. How has your family, especially mom, responded to your memoir and the act of writing it? And have you found that your relationship with your mother and family has changed since finishing the book?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. The relationship with my family definitely has evolved. Within the last couple of months, my brother Maurice just got married. My other brother, at one point, we were all living together. We hadn't lived together in years. My sibling Tunde, like it just was one of those spaces where we hadn't been in the same house, but after the pandemic, we all came back together. So it's been really beautiful. I would say my mom is very supportive and loving, and she's also like such a huge part of my son's life, as she's like an amazing grandmother. But I think sometimes like it's difficult for her. Like when this was just an idea and it was like a galley, you know, we were all just like talking about it in theory. It was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, there's just kind of like a lot of polite nods. And now that it's like pub week, that's like, there's more of a hesitation and just like, okay, like I can sense her nerve. I'm also very nervous about this tour and talking about it in such a vulnerable way. So I'm starting to feel her nervousness, and it's all warranted. So we're just trying to be like very compassionate and gentle with one another. So it's like, you don't have to come. Like usually we had a festival this past weekend, which, you know, is a long time coming because we hadn't done the Well-Read Black Girl Festival in a while. And usually every festival my mom has been there, she decided not to come this year. And so it was just like, oh, okay, like, you know, she wasn't just prepared. I think it's one thing for us to talk about it amongst ourselves in the house or on the phone or in the group chat, but then to like have other people, strangers, encounter it and know just like her most vulnerable moment. I think that's challenging for her. So she's like processing it.
We love boundaries. Was there a chapter that you found particularly hard to write?
I think the last like 2 chapters, because they were just like more, which, you know, really involved my like more romantic relationships and the relationship I have with my newborn son, that was more challenging versus like reflecting on childhood, because I had the crux of my journals and like photos and things. Like they felt there was like more distance from them, but talking about things that happened like during the pandemic and like all the anxieties that I had about motherhood and still have, you know, I'm still like working through that, was more challenging to write. Just like thinking about like, how do I measure like being as honest as possible, but also recognizing that my son might read this one day and how he might react to it. Like, what's the balance of that? And I reached out to friends who had also, you know, written memoirs or had like really strong opinions about that, just to kind of like vent or just share some of my anxieties, and they were very helpful.
Someone asks, what is the best way to find community centered around books and writing?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, your local library. Yeah, you know, we've made like this amazing community online, and I feel like it's fancy. It's real cute. You know, we're doing all the things, we're tagging each other. But really, you know, it could just be in your neighborhood. It could just be like your homegirl down the street. Like community is like 2 or more, you know, and like 2 or more gathers together. Like I think like keeping it close. The thing that I've noticed as I get older and older and friends are more busy and they have kids and things like that, sometimes it's just like hard to get together. So if you are able to make a book club, like do a buddy read and just like make it, you know, start small and then work your way up to something more significant, or plan trips together. I saw something recently that was so sweet. It was folks doing like a reading retreat where they like literally just like booked a hotel room together, and they like, that's so sweet. I love that so much. I'm like, who wants to do that with me? Raise your hand. Right, because I'm just like, can we just like go to a hotel and read like different genres and just like exchange ideas at the end, like, because I haven't read Fourth Wing, and I know everyone's like, I need to do it, so I need someone to read it with me. But yeah, I just think starting small and working your way up and being intentional about visiting libraries and going to book clubs and even online, you know, just finding people that you connect with and just being very intentional about meeting up with them.
What books did you read or reread for inspiration when you were writing this book?
Oh my gosh. This was like the good and the bad, because I just love so many people. I love so many people. So my 2 greatest inspirations for sure, and I don't think I write anything like them, just to be clear. I really loved Imani Perry. I love Imani Perry's work. Like, I think she's so magnificent. Like, my favorite book, I mean, I have so many favorites, but I reread Breathe because it's this like small little slim novella, and it's like a letter to her to her 2 sons, I should say. And I just loved, like, there's like this one scene where she's talking about like feeding one of her son raspberries for the first time, and he's like a little allergic, and it just was like such like nuanced detail that I was like, oh, I love that. Like, it just felt like you were like eavesdropping on like this moment. There's another moment where like her son, like she thinks one of her son can see ghosts, you know, because the house. And I'm just like, yes, he can. Like, I just love when it feels very conversational and intimate, and like you're there on the like, periphery, just like watching the experience happen. You know what I mean? Like when you're reading someone. Another book I love, the author Sarah Broom, The Yellow House, was also like, I love how she incorporated research and talked about, again, like those gaps of her family history where she wasn't even born yet, but like she's like writing about her father and like her mother and all these experiences that happened in her life before she was born. And she writes so much about landscape too, and just like the New Orleans and the history of it. So I thought about that a lot. So those two people come to mind. I just like was reading all kinds of things, but then I got overwhelmed.
This is my question that I didn't get to ask before, but you are also like a stellar editor. And so I want to know more about like how you've been flexing the editing muscle beyond the anthology that you did previously.
Thank you. So I, my first two collections, the Well-Read Black Girl Anthology, and then the partnership I have with Live Right, with On Girlhood, they were really looking at storytelling from a certain purview where on Girlhood, I was looking at like the Black girl protagonist and what that meant and how to write to that. And after that book, I like turned to my editor. Her name is Gina. She's absolutely fantastic. And I was just like, I would love to do this in a different capacity where I'm looking more at fiction and really like going back to my roots of like supporting debut authors. And so like after a lot of long conversations and, the encouragement of my amazing agent and my editor, and like all of it came together, and we created what we're calling the Well-Read Black Girl Literary Series. And that started in earnest during the pandemic. And during that time, we acquired two books, one by Bisrat Miskebi and one by Yarsa Daly Ward. Yarsa is known primarily for her for her poetry, and she has an incredible following online. But both of these editors are writing their first debut fiction, and you can actually start like pre-ordering Yarsa's book, The Catch. It's so amazing. It's about these two sisters who are looking for their mother. There's like this magical realism piece to it. The beauty of her prose like really shines through because she's very lyrical. Like it just is like, there's just like a beauty of the way she writes. And I had the honor of editing the work. And because I'm in partnership with Live Right, there was like, again, this gentleness of me trying this new endeavor and them like guiding me through it and working in partnership with Gina to make it happen. So that's all coming to fruition next year. They'll both be published, but it's been a long time coming. And I did it, in secret, only because I always do so many things, and people are like, what are you doing? Like, you're doing something else? They're like book club, festival, podcast. Like, what are you doing? And I just wanted to, I just wanted a little anonymity, and I wanted to test something out without like too many eyes on it. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I'm glad that Live Right gave me just like the space to be like, okay, we'll be your co-partners in this, and we'll allow you to just like feel it out and test if this is something you want to do. And, most editors, as you know, with publishing, they're like editing 8 books at a time. And I knew I couldn't do that. So these 2 beautiful books will come into the world. And I'm glad I had a hand in them and shaping. And I was able to, flex my editor muscle in a new way, especially when it comes to fiction. Like, I feel like I'm in my nonfiction bag, but like fiction was a different handling.
Today is your book launch day. Congratulations. Before we leave to sign books, I know that everybody has like feelings about book tours. It's, like it's stressful. You meet a lot of people, whatever. I'm just like wondering if you can tell us what your like very small expectations are. Like what are the like small things that you are hoping for the next couple weeks?
Thank you. That's a beautiful question. I think my expectations are that this book, Gather Me, will reach the people that need it most, that it will be a safe haven for people, that they'll be able to read and relate to the stories and say like, I believe in myself, that whatever hard thing that I'm experiencing can be overcome and I can get to the other side. That's what it felt like for me. Like everything that I've written in this book feels liberating. It feels like I can do anything. I really do have this kind of like fearlessness that's come from it, because listen, you know me. If you once you read this book, you know me. There is nothing hidden. There's just like all out there. So I'm just like, okay, that feels good. There's this sense of just like, I'm not afraid of anything. There's nothing you can say to me that I'm like, yeah, that happened. What else? Say it again. It just feels good. And I don't know if that's just like age and wisdom. I don't know what it is. It just is like, I'm really glad that I did the catharsis. I'm glad I just like poured it all out there, because there really isn't anything that anyone could say to me that would make me feel any shame, any judgment, any fear, because it's all in that book.
Oh, I love that. To quote Audre Lorde to you, you are deliberate and not afraid. Thank you, Glory, Edim.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
This was beautiful.
Thank you
so
all
much
for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Stick around. Glory will be signing books, so you know how to do that.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Should we take another?